Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Geminme The Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Esther Zeledon. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Yes,
Zeledon, yeah.
yes. And she is a Latina, a visionary, and I'm so excited that we have connected and that we're sharing this space with her today. I'm so excited for all the gems she's going to share. And of course, I wanted to give her a time to introduce herself. Who is Esther Zeledon?
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so that's a really good question. Who am I, right? And so I like to say that, I am in the business and life of impacting lives. And what do I mean by that? Like, my purpose in life is to help people identify their fire, their purpose, their reason for being on this planet, and really align their whole life to that, and then financially profit to that. And so that includes everything. I'm like that in my personal life, my professional life. That's what I embody. And that's the gift I was given to this, to this world to provide.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I love that you started with the purpose, right? Like, who are you? What's your purpose? So that's beautifully said. So thank you for sharing that. I know you're an author, right? You're also an author, you're an entrepreneur, you're a coach, your mom, you're a Latina, and all that amazing stuff. But I also know that you have a book, right? And
Yeah.
so I haven't read the book. I will read it though. And I realized that it is purposely like centered in becoming your limitless self, right? So becoming that person that has unlimited potential, right? So I really was so curious. I was like, you know what? Like before we get to the reading, I really wanted to ask her if you can give us a little toolkit of what, becoming a limitless person will be like. What are the first steps or the first different tools that we need to kind of get that ball rolling?
Yeah. So, I mean, I should first start like why I wrote it. Okay. So, books for me, I come from like really humble beginnings, immigrant, didn't grow up, with money, and books were, back then, right? Amazon didn't exist, or the digital library, right? So you went to an actual physical library. And, and I would go there and I would read books, and those were the things that would give me clarity on like my next steps and inspiration, and give me those critical thinking questions that I wasn't getting at school or from my circles, right? And that's what really would inspire me and give me that, like, help me like visualize and manifest, what I wanted in my life and what I wanted, and I always knew I wanted more. I had this like little voice in my head that was always like, you're meant for more, you're meant for this, there is more, you're gonna have it. And I just was like, but how do I do that? How do I go about having that? Especially, my parents, they were, I would see them, the immigrant thing, right? Of like, you, like, it was always a contradiction in my mind, because it was like, you work hard, you'll be rewarded, work hard, be rewarded. And I was like, that, well, I don't see that though, because I see my parents working really hard and they are not being rewarded. So in my book, I also have like chasing the American dream crossed out,
Mm.
because I noticed they would keep repeating that to me, but it was like, I would look at them and I'm like, but I don't see all that, you know what I mean? I see you and everyone around me busting their, and like working their butts off. And where is the reward? Where is the dream? I'm not seeing that. And that was always there, like contradicting to me. So I mean, back then I knew, okay, well, education will be my exit, right? So that's why like I chase, right, the education and the accolades and all that. Um, but then I saw that, I got that stuff, and that voice didn't go away. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay, so I followed the check marks, and at first they would tell me, oh, it's because we weren't born here, and you came little, so you're gonna have the opportunities because of language. So you'll see once you get your education, right? And so it was like sold again, the check marks of, get all these things, and everything is just going to come to you. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll chase the highest thing, the PhD, and go to the best schools. And I remember sitting there in my diploma, and I'm like, where is the lightning? Where's everything coming, right? I'm supposed to be automatically happy, blissful, like where's my limitless life? And no, It didn't come just from getting the check marks of the PhD. And then, and it took me a while to realize that. And I kept on chasing other ones like, oh, I have to get married. Oh, I have to become a director, executive position. And then I'm going to get these things, right? But the truth is, though, and that's what I talk about in my book, right? Your limitless life can happen at any time. It's changing that mindset. It's not in the chase. It's not when you reach that check mark. It's when you're living authentically in your authentic self and know who you are and the value you bring. Because when you don't know that, even if you chase the highest ladders, which I was, right? I was still conforming to what I thought that I needed to be and what I should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was constantly being like, oh, okay, I was working in an organization that was only 1.8% Latino, right? So here I am, Latino woman in these leadership roles, there was no one that looked like me or talked like me or anything like that. But I found myself still trying to adjust, now, I mean, no one can see me on video right now, but now I wear bright pink. But then I was like in my dark suits and in my bun, in my hair, no bracelets. And I still like shrunk myself to accommodate what I thought success and limitless meant. You know what I mean? And we see all these images on TV. But it wasn't until that I was like, who is Esther? Who do I embody? What is important to me? What is my purpose in life, right? Because I found little things like I wanted to make an impact in the world. I wanted to give back. And I found a career where I could do pieces of that, but not fully, right? Because my thing's all about helping people discover their own, right, purpose and bring that out. And so I found myself coaching and mentoring on my volunteer time, or in the organization. I would find like ways to do that, or I would find ways to change the system because so I went into international development where the system is you study, you're the expert. I'm going to go to the countries where, we're from, and I'm going to tell them what to do and what they need. And I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. I'm like, everyone has like a purpose and a vision for themselves. Why am I telling them what they need? Why don't we go listen to them and ask them what they need and fund what they need? Mm-hmm. Because if we do that and it's something they want, I imagine they're going to keep it going, because I saw that in my own self. When people actually took an interest in me and letting me do, even if it was a small thing, what I wanted, right? I held on to that and I treasured that rather than the things that were forced upon me. And, and I challenged that and I brought that model in, but, it came at a cost, right? It came at a huge cost to myself because you're fighting the resistance, changing the status quo. But when I noticed was that, that's when I debunked the things that people had been telling. People were like, oh no, purpose is a first world thing. It's not a global thing, and in that job where I got to travel to almost 100 countries back then, plus the ones I did on my own time, everyone has a purpose. Everyone has an authentic self, and in these communities, they all have their own vision for their life. And when I actually started to prove it, if we fund what they want, they actually do, they embody, they take it on, and it goes huge. So in the book, I talk a lot about my story, about that. Like the first part is that my own journey to chasing all the check marks. I did it. I got the American dream and I still was not fulfilled. I still wasn't aligned. I still felt that there was more in my mind. But now added that, I had the burden of now everyone, I've made it. Everyone depends on me. How do I have that courage to align? And then, so the second part of my book is really about, it doesn't matter where you are and when in your life. You can be 16, you can be 40, you can be 70. I've worked with even people 75. It doesn't matter. If you have a voice and you feel that something is just not right, you know what I mean? Like I need to change, or I need to go on my own. I still have this dream that I haven't done and haven't gone after. Second part is like, okay, so how do you do that? How do you reckon with that? Because you're just feeling the symptoms, but now is my idea really far off? Am I really far off from alignment? How do I know that? Right. So second part is like, how do you discover what your purpose is, your mission, your vision? How do you do that? Right. So that part I break up in the book, like, really going back to like when you were a child, what was your dream? What was your childhood dream? But like not on the cliche way of like, I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to be a nurse, or I wanted to be a firefighter, right? But like, what were the characteristics of that person? Because like, even if 100 people answer doctor, the characteristics of that doctor is all different. Like, and I've heard people that have said the same career answer, but it's all different. Some people might be a doctor because they want to find the solution to the problem, of a person's body. Other people are like, I want to connect with people one-on-one and provide quality care. Other people are like, I really want to fix that system, and be part of that. So anyways, there's so many different reasons, right? But that characteristics, that's really important. And then, like, who do you admire today and what characteristics do they embody? Because that's a reflection of who you want to be. And that's a reflection of who you want to be authentically, right? Like, so for me, like, I love Viola Davis, right? And why? Because I can see myself in her a lot. Like, she's hypersensitive. She's very giving. She has a partner, like, they do everything together. But at the same time, she's like fearless and uses her voice, right? And so I always want to like embody those characteristics in my everyday. That is my authentic me, right? And then, like, what type of impact do you want to make in the world? If you were given like $2 billion, $5 billion, what problem are you going to solve? And then how do you solve it? I mean, we can do that on the spot right now. Like, if you had $2 or $5 billion limited resources, what would you do?
I would invest it mainly in like parenting and like childhood development. I feel like a lot of the patterns and traumas and limitations and problems of the world really start there. I feel like if we could, teach our parents, support our parents, make sure they're well and healed, and obviously there's genetics into that. So once the baby's out, they have stuff going on. But, those first 7 years, right? Like, how are you parenting those kids? And yeah, that's something that I always like. I have to be in like childhood development. Like, that's something that I'm passionate about because of my experience growing up and all that I experienced and all that stuff made me the person who I was, let's say 5 years ago, and I had to do all that healing, all that stuff to become a better version of myself. And here we are, we're still working at it. But I feel like that's a powerful place to put your money.
Great. And so how would you do it? Because now they've given you the unlimited resources. How would you go about solving this problem?
I would support parents. So giving them support while they're like parenting, and also having a more holistic household. So maybe, workshops, learning how to love, how to communicate, how to like just having a holistic upbringing, like providing that to the kids. So giving obviously the education that the parents and the kids need to be able to provide that and have that, and the resources, right? So it's education, resources, awareness, giving that to the community. And yeah, I feel like that will make a big impact.
Yeah, and I could continue on that, right? And the book goes into it, so it can continue, but go further and be like, so how would you ensure that the resources and, the education got to those communities? How would they use it, right? Mm-hmm. And your answer of how, and everyone answers their how really different. Even if the global problem is the same, it's less about the problem you want to solve and more about how you solve it, because that is your unique value add to the world. That is how you solve problems. And that how you bring that to all your spaces, And so, like, I always tell people after they answer that how, like, take a moment to think, do you bring that same approach to everything that you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that is how you want to show up in the world every day. And those are the type of that's why this applies to everything, right? So when you're thinking about a job, if you can't do those things that you answered in the how, you're going to be miserable, because that is your unique solving problem way of working, right? And in jobs, we're constantly solving problems for people. Mm-hmm. And so if we can't bring our uniqueness to that space, whether it's our business, whether it's our job, or even if in our home, if our partner is not for our approach, it's misaligned. Right. So like the first step, because I'm going back to the question you asked me, right? That first step is having that awareness, of like, what is my how, right? Like, that is my how. Oh my God. And then go back in time. Have I been doing that always? because that's the other thing is people think like they're so far off, aligned. When you have this voice like in your head, you're like, I need a radical change, right? Or like, how do I even, or you're like, I'm so scared because it's going to be so different than what I'm doing, right? But the thing is, it's not. Like, you have done it in some way or another throughout your whole life, and now it's a matter of, okay, let's analyze in the past where you've been doing it and then where you have been shut out from doing that. Because that's really important too. What are the spaces that didn't welcome that? And then like, okay, so now what do I do with that? Now I need to think about it, about how can I, where and how can I do it every single day? And it may not exist. Like for me, it didn't exist. I had found in international development that I could do that with the communities and NGOs, but there was half my job I couldn't, or with my staff, right? I saw it as an academic, a professor, I could do that with my students, but not in the rest of my job, And then I found like in pieces, and like with my family, I can do it now, but like I was married before, I couldn't, or like I can do it some places, some spaces with my family, some other, and then like I thought about my circle, do they value that, right? So it's doing a whole like analysis of you. And then I was like, well, if it doesn't exist, then I got to create it.
Yeah.
Right. And I got to create a business, which is what I ended up doing, where I can do that every day. I can bring that every day because people need my solution. People need your solution. And so where can you bring that every day? So that's the first step. But then there's like a whole other 7 steps about like, what's your legacy? Great. So now you know your how, but what do you want to build in your life, right? If you had to write your obituary and rewrite it, what's missing? What is it going to say, right? And that's like gives you a clear indication of your A to B. What's missing, right? It's like, is it that, I worked with someone that was about, she felt that she hadn't passed on like the wisdom that she had learned from all these people. She hadn't been able to pass that down yet, whether that meant her kids or other generations, that was missing for her. Or, for me, it's that I really think there's so much depression and anxiety. Like that's my issue I want to solve right in this world. And I feel like I haven't had those platforms yet to provide people an outlet. Like, no, like, you know what I mean? Like you can adjust your life authentically and profit from it. I promise you. And so like, for me, the book was a big part of my legacy to be able to provide something accessible to people worldwide, right? It's not like you need to have thousands of dollars to coach with me, right? Or be, or have that access, right? As long as you have 99 cents, you could download the book and do all the exercise yourself and get that clarity. And that was really important for me as part of my legacy, right? Being able to do that global thing, right? So you do this, you look at what is my legacy? What's that scale? It may be big, it may be small. There's no right or wrong. It's just what is important to you to be able to accomplish, right? Before in your life. And accomplish, I don't mean by check marks, right? I mean by impact. And then like other questions, right? Like what do people seek you for right now that you like and that you don't like? Because just because you're good at something doesn't mean you want people to seek you for it.
Yeah.
I'm super organized. I'm a great party planner, but I don't want people to seek me for that because it's not aligned with my purpose. Now, if I could do, when I do events that are aligned, that are for helping people with purpose, yes, right? But just events to do events, no. And that's the exercise for you, right? It's like putting those alignment together because it's like my skill set, but aligned with my purpose. And then that's where the magic is, right? It's not just like putting like, sometimes we shoot 200, shoot at air, like everywhere, but not really being intentional about making sure our actions are what the things that we want people to seek us for and like really fill our cup, and people still need those things. And it's about creating new expectations, right? So once you figure this all out and you do all the exercise, again, it also includes like what you love, what you can teach the world, right? What you've overcome and how. Resilience is another big one because there's another side of purpose, what you're good at also makes you a target for some things. What's aligned with you also opens other doors, because for me, it's so much about accessibility to the world and impact and helping people discover, the individualism on a positive side. So our culture likes to criticize individualism and say, oh, that's selfish. Oh, that's this. But if you actually look at the definition, it's about your unique strength. And
Mm,
if we can all celebrate everyone's unique strength, actually, that's not selfish and it's very community, right? But the other side of that is that I challenge status quos, right? I'm hyper scrutinized because I know how to achieve, I know how to meet my goals. I question, I challenge, right? But then that means that I've overcome bullying, I've overcome hyper scrutiny, I overcome that I stay in things too long, right? And so instead of waiting until I hit crisis point, if you know what that brings to you, right? The yin yang,
mm,
you can prevent it. So instead of me ever coming on a down, I have preventative measures in my schedule so I can avoid, right, hitting rock bottom depression. I mean, I could share something that even happened to me last week. I got my first 1-star review of my book. Now, I was prepared for 3-star, 4-star, you know what I mean? Because it's not going to resonate with everyone, but I was not prepared for 1-star. And the person didn't even read it, right? And interestingly, right? And then posted on different platforms and no feedback. And I thought, like I have always been hyper scrutinized in the past, but I thought now that I've built such a positive platform and this message to the world, like, I'm like, it's not really that controversial anymore because everything's about celebrating people. You know what I mean? Like I'm not fighting an organization anymore. I'm not fighting, anything right now. Now I'm kind of like, if you resonate with my message, come, or you're curious, come. But the thing is, like, that was like, I hadn't anticipated that that's always going to exist because people are not ready yet,
mm,
or because, just the title is like, that's it, 1-star.
mm,
And that even opened the book just because of the title. But
mm,
that was a hard pill for me to swallow. But in my past, it would have taken me probably a month or two more to recover from something like that. And I probably would have stopped showing up completely for those 2 times for my audience. And this time I decided, okay, I still need to sit with it for a week, but I have all my preventative measures in place, which is like, I look at my testimonials every morning. I already have that routine. So even when I've hit rock bottom, I have already a thing that's telling me that's like, you know what, that you have a bigger impact. And I constantly, like you said, it's a journey, right? I have to constantly work at that. Doesn't define you. What other people say, remember what your purpose is in life, remember your gift, like, but I have to do that every single day. But since I have that already, like, in there, you know it was a week, and I was actually so surprised that it was just a week. But I was like, yes, like the system, it's working. But again, it's nice because as you do the exercises, the system is tailored to you. You know what
mm,
I mean? Like, what you've overcome and how, that's unique to you. Your toolkit's unique to you. Like, I'm not gonna tell you there's 5 ways to gain resilience. No, because what you've overcome and how you've done it is, that's your life. And that's really tied to your unique purpose and the yin yang that comes with that. So what works for you is not going to work for me. Works for someone else is not going to work for someone else. Sure, there's always practices that are great, like great habit, things that, that's always good practices and best practices. But that thing that's going to keep you going and like towards your legacy, towards your purpose, and keep you from crashing, that's you.
mm,
That's your own, right? And so the book on the second part really goes into all that, like, how do you unpack all that? And then it's really tailored to the high achievers, because the high achievers often, I mean, it's open broad enough that it can apply to anybody, or you can apply all this purpose thing. But I have a nice little soft spot for my high achievers out there, because high achievers are looked up to, right? They're looked up to because they achieve, because they're positive, because they give back, and they're these role models and all these things. But they're also always hyper scrutinized, bullied in silence, but don't show any of that vulnerability out to the world. And so a lot of times they suffer tremendously in silence, right? And they're suffering every day by people pleasing, overthinking, perfectionism, and that feels like procrastination, imposter syndrome, not enough time, self-doubt, right? They're going through these things, but I think there's not enough people that is like, I see you. I see you there. I know you're going through this. I know you're not public. I know you're not gonna, and I give a lot of forgiveness in my social media space because I know they're not going to comment on my posts. I know the stuff I'm going to get to them is direct message. I know that because I know what it is like to be that person, that even your comment that you put there can be misconstrued, right? And so it's just like, I'm not going to even post. I'm not going to even have a presence. And I get that. And so I have this space for them being like, I'm holding space for you. I know what it's like. But at the same time, to go from high achieving to trailblazing, you got to work through it and you got to cancel that noise, because if you don't, that voice is never going to go away. And I know it's hard, right? And so part of the book's like, how do you discover your purpose, but the next part is how do you make that into a reality and push through those things that I'm mentioning to you? Like, it's hard, and the fear of like losing it all and the fear of like what people are going to say because they've only known you a certain way, but you're always been that person. So it's kind of like you have to set new expectations. And how do you do that? And how do you do that in a way that is gentle, that is still being kind and empathetic to others, because it's also realizing they've always known you that way. So it's not their fault. They always know the version that you're willing to show. So you have to also be empathetic that it's going to be a transition to them. So knowing through that lens, it's going to be transition to the person. How can you transition them and set new expectations, right? You can instead be like, sit down. Hey, you know what? I'm doing these exercises, this cool coaching book. I realize I really want to start doing this. And did you know that this is my legacy? I'm still unpacking that, but I love you. You're in my life and I want you to be part of that process, and any help that you can give me and support would be great, right? How much of a different conversation is that than if you all of a sudden they ask you, like you discover and they ask you, hey, like with me with the party planning, like, hey, will you go, do this like 2-year party? And I'm just like, no, I can't. No, I don't want to, right? Total different reaction. And then they're like, wait, I thought you liked it. I don't understand what's going on. And then blow up fight, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. And then we avoid saying anything because we don't want those fights. Instead, if you come from it from a place of empathy and understanding to the other person, setting new expectations, there is room, right? And the people who love and support you, it'll take some time, but they'll get there, right? So it's a long-winded answer, but that whole part of that book is like guides you into, okay, once you discover it, now what do I do with it? And how do I start incorporating that in my life? And how do I keep it going? And then how does it apply to like my family? How does it apply to my work life? How does that apply to my current reality? And, step by step, how do I do that? Right. And the whole thing is like realizing half of it's mindset. You can create anything you want. There's the possibilities are limitless. That's why I called it that. It's in our mind that we put the limitations on us. And there's so much love to give in this world. Like, you're not going to lose love. You're not going to lose that belonging, and that's part of the other reason that keeps us from going after what we want, like all those fears, right? And so working through that. And then I have an accompanied workbook, right? So like people who really want to go even deeper can do that, and up to like the finest details even in your calendar, right? About how do you like and do that, and most importantly, how do you celebrate every step that you take? That's another thing that we always fail to do, is like celebrate. Even like, man, even today I discovered my purpose. Celebrate that. I have on my celebration calendar that we're doing this podcast today. Celebration, like celebrate everything along the way. Because sometimes we're always waiting for like when we meet certain thing or when we do that big change. But then that's why we feel empty when that happens, right? Instead, if we're celebrating every step of the way, then the purpose starts to feel better. And if you're showing up every day on your how and how you solve the problems, you're already feeling better. And just like, and part of that is like just starting on day one, you're already going to feel better because you're already moving towards the alignment and the awareness. And then just celebrate every step, every action you take. And so that way you're enjoying, happiness is on the way to fulfillment, it's not at the destination.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. That really was like a whole life plan. It wasn't a toolkit, it was a life plan. So I hope you guys took notes. But I really wanted to ask you, I mean, you brought up a couple of things that I'm curious about. You brought up your routines, which I definitely want to know what your routines are. And you brought out some also like fears. And I feel like it goes back to like the how that I mentioned. I really wanted to pick your brain about how that was for you, like breaking those fears. Because I'm sure they come. They come, right? They come and they go. But how do you like defeat those fears when they do come?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, well, let me start with the first question. You said routines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your
So my routines are very tied to what I've overcome, So my first thing is I wake up and I read my testimonials. That's my first thing I do. I overcame also, depression, anxiety, right? I mean, I think that's why it's so tied, right? Exactly what you said about how yours is tied, mine's tied as well, right? And so I wake up every day and read my testimonials. That's why I save every time somebody gives me a testimonial, I screenshot it. And sometimes I don't include their name, all the people I work with like to keep confidentiality unless they tell me, right? So the more I screenshot, take away their name unless they want it, and I put it in my Instagram folder under highlights. Every morning I read at least 5. That already puts my mindset in a way of like my purpose, my impact, why I'm here. So I'm already I'm already awake with that, and awake with my cup full, because sometimes I even like forget, right? That's why I always save them automatically there. And I'm like, all right, because sometimes I go back in time and I'm like, oh, that's right, I did that. Oh, that's right, I did that. And it wakes me up very positive. So I wake up in a very positive mindset, and like why with my why. That's my why, right? And then another thing like I really, really do is, so this is like, that's like a daily practice, right? That's like that. I also do my celebration calendar that I mentioned, right? So at the end of the day, before going to bed, I write down a great thing that happened to me today, even if my day was crazy. Do you know what I mean? Like crazy, there's always something great that happened. You know what I mean? In that chaos. And so I write down something positive that happened, and the thing is, like, I wish I could get up and show it to you, but mine is full for the whole year, like every single day, and so I'm so excited in December. In December, I start to practice, even starting on the 1st, reading like the whole like January. And then, and then later on, I read February and March. And so it reminds me how far I've gone, because, growth is not linear. It's like squiggly. And so when you're like in the moment, you're just thinking, like, our minds go straight into what we haven't done yet, or what's still missing and we still have left to do. And we don't spend the time to think about how far we've come. And so for me, it's like a practice of like daily, weekly, I look at my week, monthly, I look at my month. And then even like in December, I look at my year, and then I look at, and I think about like my word for the year, like this year for me was systems. And so even as I'm reflecting, I'm like, have I built systems in place? You know what I mean? And that's from everything, from me, from my family, from, professional. And even when I'm thinking about things to celebrate, I try to tie it to my word, right? And so it's like, okay, like, did I fulfill my intention for the year? So those are my 2 really big practices. Other things that I do weekly is I journal, like I have to journal dump. Like there's something about writing, like writing and encoding, like dumping your thoughts through pen. Like they've shown in science, like writing it down, whether it is like when you're getting coached and writing what you learn, and also like dumping out, right? And so I definitely make sure to make time for journaling, just to like release, when you're serving others, right? You create a lot of space for them. And to create space for others, I also need to make space within myself. And so by doing that, like the journaling helps me dump any worries I have or things like that. Also, things I do is like, I don't watch news at night. I'm a very hypersensitive person. I also have suffered through anxiety, but again, it's really tied to what I've overcome. And so I don't watch any news at night. I do that only in the morning after I've read my testimonials, and I'll look to see like what's going on in the world. And it actually fuels me when I'm looking at the world, being like, oh, you see, look at all these things happening in the world. So the world really does need me, right? And so, but at night, yeah, but at night I don't do that at all. So like sleep is really important. And so I don't do anything to disturb my sleep. And then other things, right? Like I make sure to exercise 5 times a week and things like that. But those are my main big ones. Weekly, like I also have like routines that are like not daily. Weekly I do a self-check on am I feeling aligned? Is there anything that feels off? Like, do I have a voice that's telling me something's off? Or is there something and I do that because again, I've overcome like staying in things too long, whether it's like, it could be a business partnership, a project, doing something, anything, a job. And it's not like anything's like wrong. It's just like, it's time to move on or time to like maybe even expand my circles. So I just do a weekly check. How do I feel? Things like that. Because when you do your overcoming exercise, it's like you kind of already knew when you were going through that, some red flags. And for me, it's that I knew I have these feelings I feel when the things are not aligned, like I feel kind of suffocated and things. So I'm like, am I feeling those things? How am I? Like I had like, maybe 2 months ago, I was feeling something like that in like a consultancy. And I was like, okay, I think it's time to end it. You know what I mean? And it was nothing wrong, but I was just like I already see it's coming. So I was kind of like, I think, in the next month we should, I'm going to find something, do another something. And so those are like my practices. And then I think your second question was about fears, right? Yeah. So part of the, I think fear is really tied for me also tied really closely with imposter syndrome, right? And so it's one of the things that, as I am a high achiever myself, I go through moments like that. For me, the imposter syndrome, how I've dealt with that, how I've kicked it to the curb, is being really clear about my why, how, and my values, right? So I call that like, what's your personal brand, right? And so, your why, your how, but my values are meaningful work, contribution, influence, inner harmony, and financial stability, And so even when like my clients, or if I do consultancy, if I do speaking, right, it has to align with my values, right? So even if I know my purpose in life, even if I know my how, the other things have to be right. And so the imposter syndrome comes and emerges to me when I'm not clear on my value add to the space, right? Like when I don't know what value I'm adding, and that's when that question comes. So I flip it, going, the opportunities I'm seeking that I want people to seek me for have to be tied to my why, how, and aligned with my values. When I do that, I have no imposter syndrome because I know those spaces need someone that talks about mission, vision, and purpose, that want that, my how of like, I know how to bring people together to look at those things. I know how to do critical thinking questions. I know how to coach and mentor and do these workshops. But if I'm going into a space where they're asking me and meaningful work, contribution, influence, right? If you're asking me that, if you bring an opportunity to me that is about being in a space where I'm working by myself in a corner and I can't do any of those things, and sure, I have a lot of skill sets, right? I'm a scientist. I was a previous academic. I know international development, but if you give me a task or something like, give me an opportunity that's going to be about something like super technical on myself, right? It may be tempting to take it because, oh, it aligns with one of my values, financial stability. But if it doesn't align to others, that's when imposter syndrome will kick in fully, because then I'm like, wait, I don't know my value add. Why are they asking me? I'm not bringing in my how or my why, so I'm not bringing my full self into that, And so sure, even if I delivered, I'm going to have all that cloud on me. So for me, it's all about like aligning those things like my why, how, and values into every opportunity I take and seek, when I do that, there's no imposter syndrome, because that's not my authentic self, right? That's why I said it's really important. Like, what are the things you want to be sought out for? Because just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you should be doing that, right? Or that it's not gonna, like, and that's aligned with you. And then like the other fears of like, I still have to check myself in it. It's like the fear of losing everything you've built, right? Because like our society teaches us that your worth is your title, your worth is your job, your worth is what you're currently doing right now, and that could apply to even like being a mom, right? Anything, right? They give you these titles. And when we do that, it gets really scary when you want to pivot, because you're like, my whole identity has been this other thing. And so how am I going to just pivot to that when everyone knows me this way and not this way, right? And that's why, like, when I introduce myself, right, I introduce myself with purpose, because I can tie in all my experiences, that even graduate school. In graduate school, like, I established the first like Latino, like it was like a Latino organization, like the full one for Berkeley. And they had one already for scientists and engineers, but they didn't have for the whole school, right? So I've always been like this pioneer, this person, entrepreneur, right? And so I've always been like, I want people to have these communities and spaces where they can bring out their uniqueness and talk about their purpose, talk about things. So I can go back already since I was in high school, middle school. Like, I can bring you out examples how I've been that person, and that's what I do on my CV and resume. That's what I do on my website. Like, this has always been me. And that's another way of fighting like the imposter syndrome or the fear, because if you've always been you, and your how has always been there. And when you can look at it through your whole life and lens, it's not about your title. Your title is just the one place where you're bringing that into that space right now. It's not, you've been bringing that your whole life though, right? So your pivot, you're bringing that into your new space at like 3000%. So when you go to your new space, you're like, yeah, I did that before. But now I have the opportunity to bring all my facets that are tied with my why and how, right? And that's what makes it so much greater. And that's why I'm here, right? And so it's really like pushing through that. And like, really, if you know your why and how and value add, you'll realize, you'll start to see, like, because when you answer that what the world needs, you know that the world needs that everywhere. You know what I mean? And it's really being like, oh, really having that abundance mindset, that all those places that you thought about when you were solving that problem, those are all the places where you are needed and need to be, and need to be sitting and working and all that. And so it's changing that to like, actually, like, there's all this abundance out there for me, and I'm never going to lose it all because I have so much value to add. But it's like switching that mindset, and it's also from our culture too. Like, I think when I quit my job, my parents were like, are you crazy? Like, you're leaving your pension job? Because I know my job used to pay for my 5-bedroom house, private school for my kids. Like, I had full on golden handcuffs, and it was, I mean, from the outside, it looks freaking crazy to leave that, because it's such a hard job to get in. And I had moved up and it was very cushiony, very great. But I'm like, I know there's more, and I got to take this leap. And I know there are people who need it, because when I look at my whole life, people have always needed it and I've always been there for them. Why can't I continue to do that and do that always, right? And that is how you push through that fear, is really that believing in you and believing that your how is the world, that the world needs it, and being sure of that, and changing your mindset. And that's how, doesn't mean that you don't need to check in every day and remind yourself. That's why the testimonials for me works, right? But for everybody else, it will be their own way of how they have pushed through in the past, like their self-doubt, what has gotten them through that, what has helped them feel those moments, right, of sure confidence. What was that? And put that into your daily routine, so you remember that. So every time those negative thoughts get in your head, you're like, is that thought true or not true? Is that thought serving me or not serving me? And like really doing that every day and just being like, is that because of my childhood or because what I was taught, or really what's really out there, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like you painted it beautifully when you said that, if you know the value you're adding, then imposter syndrome is not there. And the first word that came to mind is self-worth. And we have a big problem with that. Like, I mean, I would say as Latinas, just as Latinas,
Yep.
as women, women of color, high achievers, like you name it. We have a problem with self-worth because we're not taught or really, yeah, taught or told that we are worthy or that we're valuable and that, and so that's kind of ingrained in us. We have to kind of learn that as an adult, as a high achiever, as a Latina, that you are worthy, you could do it, believe in yourself and keep reminding yourself. And like you said, changing that mindset, right? And so that's a whole process that has to happen. And I feel like once you get there, I mean, I don't know what that is. I feel like there's no destination, it's always progress. But once you get to some type of self-worthiness, if that's even a thing, you'll be like, okay, like I got this, right? And you'll be able to achieve certain things. But I feel like even so, there's might be here and there where you're like, I mean, people who speak, and I'm not sure this is true to you as well. They were like, I have 20 years of experience. I've been to school and all this stuff. And I still get like these little butterflies or this insecurity or this like, little nudge in the stomach when I'm about to speak in front of an audience or whatever it is. And so I feel like it's okay to normalize. Like, yes, you're working towards becoming better, but you're never gonna become perfect. Where you're like not immune or not, under attack to some extent of change or fear. As a
Yeah.
human experience. Yeah.
And I would add too that the self-worth and confidence, it's also wanting to grow and stretch, so like for me it's like I like being stretched, like because sure, there's some places where I don't feel the butterflies, but when I stretch myself, I absolutely do, right? And because I'm stretching myself, and when you have that legacy thing to look at, like what's the legacy I want to build, right? Each one is a little stretch point. And every time you stretch, though, you grow, right? You learn so much from yourself, right? You learn a new potential that you didn't even know existed, right? And I love that. And I think that's another thing that's why I like always challenge the American dream, right? Because the American dream is about very fixed destinations. But it's, like married a certain age, house a certain age, these things at a certain time, but it doesn't have that stretching growth, right? That's what's beautiful about it. Like, you were saying, like, you're still like learning about, right, your past, you're still unpacking that, but that's beautiful, right? You're constantly growing and learning and evolving. And that's what makes human beings great, right? It's not about being perfect, right? It's progress over perfection, and doing that is what allows you to then have more self-worth, because every time you do that, you're like, wow, like I did that, that was great. Like I pushed myself, and then you can kind of see how far you can go. And then, and trust me, like once you realize that you can go as far as you want,
Mhm.
right? But you need those moments, those teaching moments to show you that. Like I was a speech delayed kid and now I give talks, like to big audiences. But sure, but if I would go by my limitations, I wouldn't be giving talks now, right? But every time you do it, you stretch more. I say that about like my videos on Instagram, because I had such a public um job that I wasn't allowed to have any social media, right? And you couldn't have anything, right? You're a US rep, right? But when I started my business, I had to open it. My first videos were terrible, terrible, terrible. But it's so funny because I was like, you know what? I'm going to post and ghost, meaning like, I'm not going to look at my video. I'm not going to like analyze it,
Listen
post
to
and
it.
go, post and go. But then now I can look back, right? Because I knew there would be a point where I would be okay with looking back, right? Enough time has passed. And now I can be like, wow, I've come such a long way. But I can't get to where I am on videos without starting. You have to start and you have to like push and grow. It's like people are not automatically great at speaking. They're not automatically great at videos. I remember some people are like, well, it's because you're more extrovert. I'm actually on the fence between introvert and extrovert, but I get energy from people, right? There's so many other ways. You can do tweets, you can talk, like there's a platform for everybody, for their uniqueness. Like, I don't think there's competition because we all bring a unique value that's going to resonate with somebody. But but we have to like be willing to do like those stretching things to be uncomfortable. And that uncomfortable is what leads to like amazingness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really wanted to ask you, I mean, you're so wise and I see and I feel your passion, through the video. And, I'm so happy that we met, in I would say divine ways, just bumping into your profile. But I wanted to ask you, like, if you could go back and speak to your younger self, that little girl, that little Esther, what would you tell her?
Oh yeah, I actually have that on my first page in my book, actually. The dedication I dedicated to my 16-year-old self that almost gave up. And I actually go to hypnotherapy and I talk to my inner child a lot. So actually you brought that up, I talk to my inner child at different ages. And I go to hypnotherapy for parenting because I want to be a really conscious parent and I want to know how we're talking about Latinas. I want to heal that intergenerational trauma. Do you know what I mean? And I want to be, and my parents did their best. And I talk about that in the book, but like I want to be a conscious parent. I want to heal. I don't want to bring baggage to my children. And I want them to see me go through that process and like even process in front of them, teach them about like therapy's great. I have them in therapy, like therapy and coaching. Like those are normal things that we should be doing. You know what I mean? But in Latino culture, it's like, no, it's only I grew up at least being like, it's for locals and this. And it's like, no, it's great growth, right? So anyways, circling around, because I go on tangents. I do go back to my old self a lot. As I was actually very quiet as a child. I was a people pleaser perfectionist. And there's a whole story in my book that I won't go too into here, but like I almost died when I was 2. My parents won the lottery and they spent it all on me. And then because of that, when we immigrated, we had no money. So I felt that I owed them everything and that I had an obligation to make things better for them, So that led me to being the ultimate people pleaser and perfectionist, So that's why I wanted out. I wanted out because of my voice, but I also was like, I need to also not add any more burden or anything to my family, more than they were already like experiencing themselves. But I remember when I was 16, it almost got too much. And I was like, and then I tried to take my own life. And I remember thinking, because I had no light to give to the world anymore. At that point, I was like really sad. And I felt like I was being a burden to them because I was sad. And it was like a moment in time where I couldn't be like perfect and I couldn't be there, And so I was like, oh, well, that's my only value to the world, is to be the perfect kid and not anything. And I remember that the doctor, he didn't tell my parents what I tried. He didn't like go into detail, which I appreciate. But he told me, he's like, you're going to do these amazing things, And he's like, you'll see. And like, there's so much more than this moment. And it's okay. You know what I mean? And I felt for the first time that I felt seen and heard, And but I still had no idea what that could mean. At that time I was focusing like just not being a burden anymore. And I'm just going to keep going back and, to be school. But I remember those words later. And so if I would go, when I put there in my book, I'd go back time to the 16-year-old self to be like, show her. And, when I do my inner work, I show her pictures, like, I'm like, no, look, like you're doing like these amazing things now. You have a voice that you're like giving out to the world. You're not silent. You have this amazing partner and family that you always dreamed about. So you have it, so don't give up, like it's gonna happen, like trust it, trust in synchronicity, trust in the journey, and just, keep going, right? But that's what I would do, because there was so many times where I was like, is this ever gonna get better? Is this worth it? And so I would go back and be like, absolutely yes. And of course, I wish I had my book in the library back then, so I could have like been a lot more aligned, but sooner. But at least, I think when she sees that, she's happy to know that it did happen, and not when I was 70.
That's so beautiful. I feel like that has been one of the best responses that I've gotten in me asking, what would you say to your inner or your younger self? That was very nice. And I'm so proud of you that you went through all that, and here you are, doing it, killing it, empowering so many people. So yeah, God bless you. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So I have a couple other questions for you, but I feel like I really want to kind of twist it a little.
Okay, I'm ready.
So in terms of like healing process, right? I would say like family oriented. I mean, I'm not sure what your family dynamics are, right? In terms of like your parents and stuff like that, but like, have you been able to heal those, things that you mentioned about your parents and not like having that connection with them or feeling like you're
Yes.
etc.
Yes.
Like were you able to do that, and how did it look like?
Yes, I was able to do that. It was a process, a very long process, I would say. I first, but worth it, because I needed to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, to be able to, the way I see it is like, even in my career, my personal life, I had to first believe that I deserved it. So we talk about mindset, that I deserved this. Because remember, I come from the people pleasing perfectionism, and I didn't believe I deserved it. And so I had to go through healing of, yes, I do deserve it, and that required me to first go into therapy and understand the dynamics in which I grew up in, right? So what was my role? What was the role I played? And what were the dynamics, right? And then, so some of it was like that inner child work of like hypnotherapy, right? But other parts was just even therapy of like the family dynamic itself, right? Where am I in terms of my sibling? What was my lived experience growing up, the traumatic things that, happened to me, and those things, how I lived it, my relationship with my siblings as well, the dynamic, right, of my parents and me. And I needed that also to become a better parent as well. Like, so I would say like it affects everything in your life, right? And so therapy helped me understand the things I was bringing in as a mom, because like my daughter also had a traumatic birth, and I was repeating the same things. Like, I was overly sheltering her, I was scared and limiting her, but not like I was just repeating it. Like I'm a person that's very like, like I'm on to growth, but I was like automatically repeating those behaviors. And therapy helped me realize, look what you're like, how did I want it to be? I wanted to be that I wanted them to see me as brave, and like changing the perspective, like actually she's not weak. The fact that she survived, she's brave. The fact that she's gone through it and she's been through like therapies and then managed, damn, she's amazing, right? But so I had to reframe it in my mind from like weak and fragile to brave and resilient. But I needed that connection in therapy to understand like, how are my dynamics? How did my family see me? How did I see me? Because then you bring that into everything else that you do, right? And then you bring that into how you see yourself. And so once I saw even myself, right, by thinking about like, by doing that work on me and doing that work on my daughter, I was like, wait, I'm also a survivor. I'm also really brave. I'm also, look how much I've gotten. I'm also really resilient, right? And so you see that those same patterns, right? And then it was like, actually, I do deserve everything that's going on right now. And that it's okay to put me first sometimes, that actually by putting myself first, I can actually serve more and others better, right? And so once I did it about that reframing as well, like I didn't have to exhaust myself to everyone else. I could still be there for everyone else. I was great space, but I had to take care of myself first. So that's how that journey went of like reframing, because what goes on with you is how you then frame and see yourself. And so once I realized that, I could change the way I framed me. And so then I started having discussions with my parents about it. My parents will not do therapy and coaching, but they are willing to. I sat down with them and really explained at the end of the day, um, I noticed when I would talk about my childhood before, they would get super defensive because I was coming at it. It's kind of like the example I gave earlier. I wasn't coming at it at an empathetic lens. I was coming at it like, oh, this happened to me and this, and that. You know what I mean? Instead of being like, starting off with, why are people defensive to begin with? People are defensive to begin with because they feel that you don't love them anymore, that you're rejecting them, and they feel horrible about it, right? And so when I changed it to, I'm going to address that from the beginning. I love you guys so much. I know you did your best. And I don't want any different parents. I don't want, I'm not asking to change anything. I know it was circumstantial, but hey, I would like to sit down and let's talk about, like, I'm learning about how I took that in and how I lived it. And I would love to share that with you. Right. And so it becomes a much more inclusive conversation. And also I'd be like, and I would love to learn about what were you going through at that time. So it becomes more inquisitive and learning about them and me. And then they were a lot more open to it. Well, before when I came at it, like, 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 I can't believe you did that. Do you remember? And like, I should have traveled and you guys would stifle my creativity. You know what I mean? Like, instead of coming at it like that, when I came at it from like, I want to learn what you were going through because something must have been like that, why I lived it like this. I also learned so much about from them, right? And then I started to tell them to like, and this is hard, especially when you're like from Latino culture, but I also came to them being like, I know this sounds very gringo to you, but it's not in the sense that it's not an obligation for us to have a relationship. I'm not obligated to. I want to. And then for them, that was really shocking because for them, it's like an obligation. And I'm like, I don't want to feel obligated to you. I don't want to feel obligated to anyone anymore. I want it to be because I want to. Don't you want me to call because I want to, because I have pressure, you know what I mean? And at first it was like really shocking, like, you know, entiendo eso, you know what I mean? Like that's, and I was like, understand it. Do you want me to? I mean, I had to repeat it. And, and then like, they started to understand that. And the relationship between me and my mom has changed dramatically. And I also started talking to her like, hey, like when you call me, I need you to support me. Tell me the positiveness. I already have tons of negative voices in my head all the time. I don't need your worries. I need your support. And so now, like, it's like she calls me and the first thing she says, like, so how's that book? How's this? And I know it's taken effort, but I love that. You know what I mean? Like, and I know it's hard, but just the little efforts that she makes means the world to me because that means like she hears me, And then every time I tell her, I'm like, thank you for asking me about that book. That really means a lot to me, and then, and it's awkward at first, right? Because it's like you're changing the whole
dynamic.
But little by little it changes. And now it's funny. Now she sends me like pictures that she sees of positive messages and like things she found on the internet. And it's beautiful because we are evolving together. And I feel so much more connected to her together, and she goes out of her way, and I feel like I know from understanding her childhood and everything too, I have more understanding, and she has more understanding of what I go through too, because I also at the same time, like, we don't share everything with our parents either. We have to understand that. Like, I don't think they understood that I had negative voices in my head all the time. I don't think they understood that. They only saw the achiever, so I don't think they understood that what I needed was just I need them to support and champion me. I already have naysayers in my life everywhere else. You know what I mean? Like when I was working, right? This is like in the past. And so when they understood that, they had no idea. And I was like, so as you guys, as my parents, you want to take care of me, that's the care I need. So that is how like I transformed that relationship with my parents. And then I started doing that with my siblings, you know? So I didn't do my siblings first. I did my parents first and then with my siblings. And I was always close to my sister, you know, and like my brothers were there, but I started developing much more deeper bonds, right? Not just superficial, like, you know, come on, you know, talking about not, I want to talk to them about deep stuff, you know, like deep things. And I want them to take interest and I want to take interest in their stuff beyond like the superficial. And it's a process. But I really believe that if we start to do that, you know, in our families and even with our friends, you know, my friends, I ask them, like, is there something I could be supporting you with right now? Like, not even just events, but like, is there something that you really want to do that I don't know about? And then once they tell me, if I see little things and opportunities, I send it to them. Like, you know, and it's like, I feel like if we actually all do that, I have this talk I give on the new Latinx dream. I really believe that if we start, you know, infusing community based on like our purpose, you know, our dreams, right? And we create community around that. That is the dream we should be pursuing, right? Not the American dream, but like a new dream based on like our uniqueness, our purpose, our dreams, and like if we leave all the negativity away, we already have that enough in our minds. We don't need it from like the people close to us.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable. I know that, you know, our families are often a topic that we get very emotional about. And like you said, it wasn't easy to be able to have those conversations with them, but I'm so glad you did, right? Because that, you know, makes you a better mom, a better human, right? And now you have better relationships with them. So you definitely inspired me. I have had conversations with my mom about like my upbringing and like sharing how I felt and setting boundaries, which are hard to put.
Yeah.
And but when you mentioned about like the conversations or like, oh, when you call me, you know, like I want to hear positive things. And I immediately thought about like my grandma or like, you know, the first thing when you call your grandma, the first thing she's going to tell you, oh, Flanito, blah, 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 right? Like
Yeah.
the gossip and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I mean, I love calling my grandma because I want to know about her. I want to like spend time with her. But there is this dynamic that every time I speak to her, there's like some gossip going on. And I'm like, well, take on me all, like trying to like change the topic.
Yeah.
And I do that all the time. I'm like, I don't want to be a part of it, right? Um, but yeah, I'll see what I could do with her.
No, it's tough. I mean, that's the thing. I don't entertain any, no one calls me for gossip anymore. And it's tough. It's tough. But remember, it's about what you want people to seek you for. They have other outlets for that. And eventually, I think it's also like, you know, retraining your brain not to gossip about other people. But, you know, that's a whole process. And it may be too late for our
Yeah,
older,
that's the
you know,
thing.
family members. Absolutely, you know,
Trying to
but at the
just
same
say
time,
encourage certain things, but it's hard sometimes with them.
yeah, exactly. And people will be people. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to be, how I explained it to them was I'm very hypersensitive. And so when you talk to me about someone, I think about them, I feel for them, I get angry for them, you know, it messes me up. And so I
Mhm.
said, I know, like, and I'm like, and you know, and I put it all about me. I put it that it's all like, it's my locura, but I can't, you know, like it's too much for me to handle, which in reality, it's true.
It
I
is. It
can't,
is.
I can't, it's too much. And so once I do it like that, I'm like, so tell me about your cafecito, tell me about what you're doing, what Netflix show you're watching, because once you mention someone else, it's just too much for me. And then they're like, okay. And then, so then I just remind them when they, you know, until it's like new expectations. Cause right now you are the person they can call and it's like rerouting it, you know, like it's like a router almost being like, actually, I can't be that person you call for that anymore, but you can call me and tell me all about that telenovela you watched, anything else, you know what I mean? And so like sometimes like, you know, I get calls about their whole Netflix show, but I prefer that over gossip, right? And so it's also like if it affects you, it's like as you said, it's new boundary setting. But for me, boundaries are just like setting new expectations, right? And
Mhm.
so it's like having those conversations even before she even brings up the gossip, like, you know, I was thinking the other day, this really like affects me. Do you think from now on we can start talking about like your shows and this and that? Okay. And then they'll forget, and then you have to just like remind and
Right.
remind. And but I have been successful in that no one calls me anymore for gossip. And when I'm around circles, I can feel myself being like, okay.
Hands up.
Yeah.
Oh man,
It's
I
not a good
actually want,
process.
yeah, it is. And like you said, just gently reminding them. I wanted to ask you, I know we're getting a little bit top to the hour, a little bit more than that. So I do want to be mindful of your time. Thank you so much for being so generous. I do want to ask you, I know you mentioned certain routines and rituals you do and therapy, but I wanted to pick your brain. I know you mentioned also that you love to read. So I did want to know like what books you would recommend, apart from yours, of course, that our listeners, dive into to like kind of get their spirits high and become that limitless self.
Yeah. One book I love is Loving What Is by Byron Katie. So that book is great because that one talks about the thoughts in your mind. So like all those thoughts, like you challenge them, or like, and even it helps you also be very empathetic towards other people and their actions. So I find that book really powerful. It's all case studies, but it's a whole 4-question method on challenging your thoughts about people, about situations, or even about yourself. Like, is that thought true? Where is it resonate? And then it's like, and then really turning it around, like, is that thought about you? You
Mm.
know? And so it makes you challenge it. So like for me, for that mindset, for like really like, especially, like I really encourage that, especially for the Latinos that are struggling with like boundaries with their family and like, the negative voices and all that. Like that book was like really pivotal for me to
Mm.
have this empathy, towards everyone around me and really understanding where they were coming from. So that's where that Loving What Is kind of like title comes from. It's like having an understanding where they're coming from and then like you being able to meet them right halfway. So I would say that one was like really key. The next one I really liked, which is not it's The One Thing by Gary Keller, right? So he talks it's more on the businessy professional side, but what I really like about that, because you can apply that principle to anything, it's about picking one thing. So that's the thing, like we always want to do like 20, 30 projects all at once.
Mhm.
And his whole thing is about you pick one. You pick one and you master it, right? And that helps you because then you celebrate, right? Progress. You can see how far you've gotten. You can see how like you're A to B, right? You can do all that. And so that one thing is great for us because it's like it shows like, for example, we always overestimate what we can do in 1 year and we underestimate what we can do in 5.
Mm.
And so it's all about like how do you like really do like that intention setting. And what's nice about it too is that it talks about purpose is the foundation of everything. And when you have purpose is when you make priorities. And when you have priorities is where you get productivity. And when you get productivity is where you get growth. And so he talks about all the big companies, his own, Keller Williams, Walmart, everything was founded on mission, vision, and purpose, right? And so of course, I like that book because it's really aligned with my own purpose. But I will say that how my book complements his book is that he doesn't tell you how you discover your purpose,
Mm.
right? So he talks about how important purpose is in everything in life, right? Because you can think about productivity and priorities, even in terms of your own family, right? Of your own anything. But he talks about all that, how that goes into like your family, your professional life, if you have a business, right? But doesn't really like go into how you do that. But I think it's great because it's a nice complement with mine. I'm telling you the whole formula on how you find out your purpose. Um, Other books I like are more on the like I used to always pick up the Celestine Prophecy and Alchemist because it really is about like that's more of a story, but you can then reflect on your own life and your own path right? So like the Celestine prophecy, I love because it talks about synchronicity, which I strongly believe in. And I talk about that in the book. Like, I don't believe that there are coincidences in life. I don't believe you meet people by chance. And so that's why when you reached out to me, anybody who does that, I'm like, that's synchronicity, you know? So we didn't meet by chance. We're not here by chance. We both have a message to share to each other that's really important that we both needed to hear. And so I talk to everyone. Like if I'm on a plane, I talk to the person next to me. If I'm on a bus, I talk to the person. As I walk down the street, like, you know, if I see someone selling fruit, as I buy it, I ask him something. I believe everyone has a message, you know, in every encounter. And sometimes we miss them because we don't take that pause. We don't take that time to be present. And there's so many messages that we miss, you know, and so many moments of synchronicity that we miss. And I experience it like every day. And I leave it open, like even this weekend, like on Sunday, I was just like, you know what? I want to go to the Colonial. Like there's this Colonial home by my house. I just feel like we need to go. I told my husband, and we went, and then I met someone there, and he gave me this really inspiring message. And I was like, I wasn't even expecting it, nothing. I had no idea, but I was like, you see, I just knew. So like the Celestine prophecy has like this more spirituality. It doesn't matter what religion you are, right? It's about this thing, like we have these energies in the world. There's these moments, be open to them, you know, invited in. And you'll see that when you have like your purpose clear, like these messages just come to you from all sides, you know, or if you like not sure, you know, the universe is sending them out to you and you have to be open to. So that's the Celestine prophecy, which I love. And the alchemist is similar. You know, the alchemist, you know, it's the same thing. He's on a journey, right? But it has like all these messages in there about like knowing who you are, right? Being who you are, and that it's not about like he was chasing gold. I think it was like the book. I don't even remember the story that well, but it was all about the chase, and it wasn't about the chase. It's about the journey, right? And like enjoying the journey and all that. So, anyways, those are a few, but I have tons because I told
I
you I
love
love books.
those. I'm actually gonna, buy them now. I'm gonna go on Amazon and get my books, including
And I
yours.
have all these other books too, but those are the ones that come into mind from our conversation. You know?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for sharing those. I feel like they definitely add value. I have read the Loving What Is, so I definitely agree with you on that one. And then the other ones I haven't read, so they're gonna be on my bookshelves very soon. I wanted to give you the opportunity to share your services, to share how people could connect with you, how people could, how we could support you, how could we collaborate you or reach you, you know, just connecting. I mean, like you said, I feel like we did connect for a purpose, and I'm already thinking about ways we could, continue to collaborate somehow, some way. But yeah, tell us how could we.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we already mentioned I have my book and workbook, right? And that's for me is my accessibility piece. That's part of my legacy. But I offer on the terms of services, I'm a coach. I offer one-on-one coaching. So like, you really want to know what your next steps are. Who am I? What is my purpose? Is my, I don't know what to do next, right? I help you unpack all that, right? Like everything we talked about, like who is my authentic self, bring out everything you've overcome, put it all together for you. So you have like clarity on like who I am, where I am. And I have like, I have my website, beactchange.com. I'm also on Instagram, b.act.change. And there I have tons of like testimonials. If you want to see the transformation people have, usually people come in and work with me and are like anxious, like I don't know what's going, or like in panic, or just feel like something's like not right, or I'm meant for more and I don't know what that is, and just searching for that. And when we finish working together, they like know who they are, super calm, feel abundant, know exactly what they're going to do, know what their plan is, and know where their value add is, right? So that's my one-on-one coaching program. I also do workshops. So like a lot of times, so sometimes it's like workshops with your girlfriends or your family, even to like really do like shared mission and vision, right? So one thing is like your individual purpose, right? But sometimes you're like, hey, I want you to come do a workshop with my family or with my small business. I've done them with small businesses or my company or even my team at work, because I want us all to know what is all of our individual purpose and value add, and help us come up with like a shared mission vision together. So we all know what we're bringing into, whether it is in my family, whether it is in the workspace, and that we're all meeting the needs of everyone that's there, and, you know, feeling joy and, you know, and being present every day, whether it's in your family, feeling joy for being there and being, you know, no one's feeling left. Everyone feels like they're a part of it and know what they're, you know, building together. Or at work, right? Like your team, you got know what you're working towards, you know what you bring to the table. You put the imposter syndrome out. You're not competing with your colleagues anymore because everyone knows how I'm adding, where I'm going, and can support each other. So I do those type of workshops as well. And I also do speaking, you know, so I do like keynote, and I also do workshops at different conferences. So those are my range of services, you know, depending how it resonates with the individual, but it's all rooted in the same thing, right? Alignment, right? Having that alignment and being able to trailblaze, right? We all want that. And so, you know, but we need to start at the, you know, who are you, or who is that, and then soar from there.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that we spend this time together. You know, like I said, it wasn't a coincidence that we're here, you know, together from different, you know, countries, parts of the world. But I'm so blessed and humbled to have you here. And like you always, you know, welcome to Geminme The Podcast, to whatever I'm doing. Like I said, I'm already thinking about ways we can collaborate some way, somehow. So yeah, I am so happy that you're here, and I'm sure that listeners are also very happy from everything you mentioned. I mean, you shared so much, so many gems that I'm sure I'm gonna go back and listen to. Like, okay, yeah, I missed that one. Um,
And tell me, you know, if some listener likes it, please. Yeah, I told you I read my testimonials every day. Tell me you like that. Tell me you liked your episode, what you got from it, your aha moment. I
yes.
love community. Tell me in DM, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. I want to hear it. So
Okay, well, thank you so much for this space. I truly appreciate you, and thank you everyone for listening. It's truly been an honor
thank you.
to share this space with you. God bless everyone.
Thank you.